Hey everyone, I'm HokiHoshi and welcome back to another car review. This one's on the Bentley Continental GT Speed. The Continental has always been known as Bentley's more entry-level car, but that being said, it's still a Bentley, and this thing has a W12 twin-turbo engine in it, pushing over 600 horsepower from the factory. The Speed version, which we have here in Forza, also features lowered ride height, upgraded suspension, and just a little bit more horsepower. Now, for me, this car's just really always been off my radar. I've always been on the side of the scrappy tuner that builds its way up to compete against the elitist high-end supercars like this, but we're about to take it for a first drive and let's see if it changes my mind. So we're here on a snowy evening with the GT Speed, and we're going to be taking it on a nice evening cruise under the viaduct and through the valley on the north side of the map. With the snow, I might not be able to push the car as hard as I'd like, but that's okay. Again, this is a Bentley, so let's get in that Bentley mood, take her for a night drive, and the first thing I'm going to do is be quiet for a second so you guys can hear the engine sounds. I don't know about you, but that crackling afterfire is one of the best sounds to ever come out of my computer's speakers. Just like with my last review on that Fiat, I'm really surprised by the sound of this thing, and I might kind of have a negative bias coming into this because I've seen a lot of bad car sounds in Forza Horizon 4, but so far a lot of the sounds for my review series have been really surprising me. This one can definitely be chalked up as one of the good ones. As for how the car's driving, I'm really loving it so far. I'm a little bit nervous driving this heavy car on the snowy roads, but it's just taking care of me, going exactly where I want it to go. It's not oversteering, it's not understeering. It's behaving really well. It seems so balanced, especially considering I think this car weighs almost 4,000 pounds. The Continental comes as A-Class stock, and I'm really seeing a higher end S1 tune here. With the heavy weight, I don't really see this car pushing well into S2 class, but again, I get a great feeling from the handling of this car. It's very predictable to me, kind of like how I felt in the Datsun 510, but that was, I think, a C-Class car from the factory, and this being a couple classes higher, it's just more impressive that straight out of the factory, it feels great, and I want to keep that feeling as I push it into S1. So with the test drive done, let's pull back into the garage and see what kind of tuning upgrades we can do. Okay, so let's check out some tire compounds first. It looks like it comes with stock sport tires, upgradable to race. We can do some snow tires or rally tires, and we also have the option to put on some drag tires as well. Now, okay, I'm pretty surprised by the aero here. Wow, alright, so I was not expecting this. I was really just expecting the Forza front splitter and the Forza rear wing. Holy cow. Okay, so we definitely have some options here. I think I actually recognize that wing. I'm guessing this is actually a real GT racing kit. Kind of looks familiar to me. Well, I'm super excited that there's some options to play with here, even though, and I do have to say, there were no wheel spacing options, which does bum me out. Let's look at engine swaps. And there are no engine swaps. You know, I can't say I'm that upset about it. I really wanted to keep the stock engine anyway. Looks like we have a rear wheel drive swap if we want. I'm going to keep it all wheel drive though. Alright, so I'm going to spend some time playing around with the options here, and I'll come back with a tune. Alright, so we're back here with the tuned GT Speed, and we're looking at an S1 all-wheel drive car coming in at 852 horsepower and weighing just over 4,000 pounds. So to talk about the tune a little bit, I didn't really stray too far from my base tuning method. The car drove really well straight out of the box, and I just didn't want to mess that up. And that's something that I think my formula and my base tuning method does really well. So if you want to know how to do that, go ahead and check out that other video. But for now, the things I kind of did adjust from that tuning method are that I did do a higher diff setting both in the front and the rear, and I also found that this car took really well to higher caster settings, so if I'm remembering right, this is actually at max 7 degrees of caster. So as usual, you can always check out my tune that I made on my storefront, just HokiHoshi, spelled the same as you see here on YouTube. But now let's take this thing out on my test track and see how it stacks up. So after spending some time tuning the car, I kind of learned that I just need to trust it. I always felt like with its big weight, I was about to lose control at all times, but it never lost control, and that was kind of a weird feeling. There's just something very controlled and very balanced about this car, especially with this big wing that I threw on it and the big front splitter as well. Had plenty of downforce, which kept me tucked down to the road. I kind of felt like this car was going to struggle in the uphill hairpins that are coming up in the video here, but as you're about to see, that just never happened. There's no wheel spin, no kicking the rear end out, no smoke. A lot of my tunes in some of my lighter cars really like to kick the rear end out during this section, but again, as you can see, that's just not happening here. This thing was glued to the road. Even though the Bentley kept trying to prove to me that it could handle aggressive driving, I just couldn't shake the feeling that I needed to baby it. That being said, towards the end of my time with the car, I started to actually finally feel its limits, and that's where the car really opened up for me. During the laps of this test track, I started to forget that the car was some big, heavy luxury sedan at one point, and started treating it like a real sports car that it was, and that's when the driving style really started to fall in line for me. So it's needless to say that I really liked this car. When I started this series only a few cars ago, I was kind of thinking that most of the cars I'd find would be duds, and maybe I'd find a few gems here and there, but so far every car has given me something special, and I'm starting to realize that even though there's 500 some cars in the game, it's not really just numbers padding. There are a lot of really unique vehicles in the game, and a lot of them are really something special, and that's what I came into this series hoping to find. The Bentley Continental GT Speed has been a great example of that, but we still have a few more things left to do. So let's get it on the lap time board, and then we're going to debut the HokiScore system. Alright, so the only other S1 class we have to compare this against is the GTR LM, which I would normally say is very strong competition, but being detuned into S1, it's still a worthy competitor, but not quite the top tier that I would consider it in S2 or X class. But let's see how the Bentley did. And the Bentley did the lap in 2 minutes, 20 seconds, 0.721, just a half second short of that GTR LM, which I would say is a very impressive time. There's a lot of potential for this car, but there's one thing left to do. Let's give it a HokiScore. Alright, so this being the first episode with the HokiScore system, I'll go over a bit what the categories mean while I'm grading the car, starting with Horizon Life. This section more or less means how much enjoyment do you get out of the car in the open world. It doesn't really have to do with competitive scoring systems, but it means how much fun is the car as just kind of a single player open world sort of car. Alright, so the first scoring category, being pretty self-explanatory, is looks. How good does the car look, interior and exterior, modified or unmodified? I'm going to go ahead and give the Bentley a solid 7. It's not quite my style, but it's so clean and well put together. If you do drive in cockpit mode, the interior looks really nice as well. Overall, I feel like it's a bit subtle and understated, and I've never been a fan of the more round body styles, but it does what it does really well, and that's why it gets a score of 7. Now on to another pretty self-explanatory one. How good does the engine sound? I'm giving the Bentley a very good score here of a 9. I love the crackling afterfire of the engine on this one, and the engine itself doesn't really sound computer generated. It has a nice realistic engine note to it, and that's why it gets the score that it does. Now moving on to customization, this one has to do with how many customization options there are for the car, whether it be body kit, engine swaps, wheel spacing or not, things like that. And for the Bentley, I'm giving it a 5. I was really surprised by the body kit, and that was a welcome addition, but there were no engine swaps and you couldn't do wheel spacing, which definitely was a bit of a bummer. Now let's move on to the next category. This one is basically just how fun the car was to drive. For the Bentley, I'm giving it a 6. It was definitely satisfying to drive, but like I said earlier, it was really hard to shake the feeling that I was almost going to lose control, and I never truly felt comfortable with the car. That being said, it was still satisfying and enjoyable to drive, so it gets just kind of over that halfway mark with a 6. Now for the competitive category, these are scores representing how I feel the car would perform in the different disciplines. Not necessarily online, but more how easy would it be to 3-star a PR stunt or complete a race in first place, that sort of thing. Now starting with drag, I'm giving the Bentley a 2. There's just so many better options out there. The car is too heavy and it's just not set up for drag racing. It's not quite a 1 because there's worse options out there. It is all-wheel drive and it makes some good power, but it's so heavy, it's not set up for drag, and you might as well be dragging something else. Now the rally score is gonna be low again for similar reasons, just because the car is so heavy, not set up for rally, and realistically there's just so many other better options out there. So for the rally score, the Bentley gets a 3. Now onto the race score. I was really surprised with how well the Bentley performed compared to the Le Mans GTR, and I was finding it pretty easy to beat pro drivatars in my free time, so I'm giving the Bentley an 8 for the race score. Now for the drift score, I'm giving the Bentley a 5. There's definitely worse drift cars out there, and well, there's better ones too, but in the hands of a competent drifter, it would be pretty easy to 3-star any drift zone that I could find, so it gets a 5 right in the middle. The online score is a representation of how competitive I feel the car is in events like the Rivals leaderboards or PR stunt leaderboards, things like that, and I feel like the Bentley gets a 3 here. It might get up there on some of the Rivals leaderboards, maybe, possibly some of the, top 5% on the drift leaderboards, but I just don't really see much use for this in a competitive leaderboard hunting sort of aspect. Alright, and with that, that brings us to the right side of the screen where we're doing our bonus points and the total. So starting with flexibility, this is a representation of how flexible the car is. I like to think of it as kind of a score of how much you can main the car. So it's actually a math formula with this one. I'm taking the drag, rally, race, and drift scores plus the customization score and dividing that by 5 to get the flexibility score. And the Bentley gets a 4.6. Now again, this score represents sort of just how much you can use the car for everything. A perfect score being a 10 means that this car would be just the perfect car. You'd never need to use another car in Forza. It can do, everything equally as amazing. So a 4.6 is pretty decent actually. And with that said, moving on to the style points, this is sort of just how cool the car is in Forza. Is it a really rare car? Do you not see it driven that often? Does it have some kind of cool racing pedigree to it? That sort of thing. And this one, instead of going 0 to 10, is -5 to +5. So it can kind of get a negative style points car if it's just not a cool car. But it can get a little bonus style if it's just a really cool or really rare sort of car. And I'm giving the Bentley a 3. It's got a ton of class to it, and I never see it driven that often, so I'd feel pretty cool rolling up to a Forzathon live in the Bentley Continental GT Speed. So let's give the car a total here and see how it did. With everything added up, we're looking at a total Hoki score of 55.6. Now, of course, we don't yet have anything to compare that to because this is the first video with the Hoki score. But just to give a point of reference, a perfect score would be a 105. Now, I really don't think any car will ever get there, so I'm pretty sure that 55.6 is kind of an above average score. Not phenomenal, not terrible, but we'll see how it goes as the point system moves forward. So let me know what you guys think of the Hoki score and the video as a whole. Do not forget to comment with whatever cars you'd like to see next. And with that said, that just about wraps up our review of the Bentley Continental GT Speed. Sorry for going a bit over on time for this one, but guys, I've got more car reviews on the way. I'll be debuting a new series before the end of the year, and if you're watching this right when I post it, Fortune Island is only one day away. I can't wait. I'll see you in the next one, everyone. Thanks for watching.